You got our attention earlier today when you sent us this appeared to be early draft or potentially what the Fed chair nominee will say to Congress tomorrow. First of all, it's surprising to get that out there ahead of time. What was in it, and why do you think this saw the light of day?
It's interesting. I'm not entirely sure why his prepared remarks were released before the actual testimony takes place tomorrow. What is interesting is that I'm already getting ahead of myself. Chairman designate or nominee to be the next chairman of the Fed, Kevin Warsh, focused entirely on the Fed's monetary independence. That's to say that the Fed is responsible for any inflation that occurs in the economy and so needs to set interest rate policy accordingly. But he specified that the Fed is responsible to both the executive branch and the Congress in any additional responsibilities that it takes on, including bank regulation and any other attention that it gives to issues basically beyond setting monetary policy.
So the Fed is responsible for any inflation? So even a supply shock, such as what we're seeing right now with the Strait of Hormuz being effectively closed and an increase in energy prices, that could be, in his view, attributed to the Fed?
That's the line in his prepared remarks, and it struck me as shockingly hawkish, especially for somebody who's being appointed to the role with the expectation from the president that he's going to deliver interest rate cuts. Now, the political mind that I have, or my political brain, kicks in and says that he needs to assert some degree of independence. He needs to sound somewhat hawkish if he's going to appear politically independent. So this could all just be political rhetoric. It could be a little bit of theater. But this is also very reminiscent of the Kevin Warsh that we knew when he was a governor 20 years ago.
I want to dig into that, but it also gets to so many members of this administration. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, but if you go and watch some of those confirmation hearings, they seem to toe the line and kind of say what they should or what they expect members of Congress to hear, that, we're going to do the right thing, I'm going to take my job seriously. And then once they get into the job, they kind of do the president's bidding. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. Do you feel like Kevin Warsh could possibly be doing that? He knows to get the job, he probably has to say certain things, no?
I think there are three certain truths that we need to keep in mind as we head into tomorrow and tomorrow's hearing. The first is that this is all political theater. So you're exactly right there. He's going to say what you expect him to say. He's going to sound reasonably hawkish. We know the Democrats on the committee are going to really ask him his opinion about the DOJ's investigation of the Fed and the Fed's independence. They're going to say that he's perhaps unaware of what's going on the lower end of the income distribution. The Fed needs to deliver economic outcomes for a broad swath of Americans. We know in advance that that's what's going to take place. The other two truths that are equally important and perhaps most important for markets are he doesn't have the votes to get through committee. Tom Tillis, Republican senator from North Carolina, is not going to allow him to move through committee. And then even if he does move through committee, he's not going to have the votes on the FOMC to deliver big interest rate cuts. So we need to keep all three of those facts in mind as we head into tomorrow.
There's a checks and balance on that Fed board, right?
That's right. There is a certain degree of checks and balances when it comes to who gets to set monetary policy and who gets to decide on the path of interest rates. And the Fed chairman alone, the chairman of the board of the Federal Reserve System, does not have the single vote that decides. Instead, he needs to really build a coalition. And right now, it's a hawkish committee.
Yeah.
So let me present you with a hypothetical then, Stuart, if we're going to play this out. And if Kevin Warsh gets approval, and if, let's say, Senator Tillis drops, his opposition, Fed Chair Jay Powell actually ends up stepping down, and there is some sort of transition here. Does the path for Federal Reserve rates this year change when that happens?
Probably not very much. Okay. Probably not very much. The first thing that we need to keep in mind as we count votes is that if we were to end up seeing Kevin Warsh ascending to the Fed, which is a big if, he would take Myron's seat. So the most dovish person on the committee ends up leaving. You then end up having someone who's basically a moderate in Chairman Powell stepping down for the sake of tradition, effectively. And the real swing votes, the people who are probably most important right now in setting the thematic trajectory of interest rates, of policy rates, are regional Fed branch presidents who are hawkish. And so he's just not going, even if he were to ascend to the chairmanship, even if everything evolves as it typically does, he's probably not going to have the votes on the committee to deliver the sort of interest rate cuts the president wants or that Stephen Byron says that he wants right now. And he's not going to be able to make it through committee as long as the DOJ investigation is going on and Republican Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina has his foot firmly down. He is not going to allow any Fed nominee to move through while the DOJ investigation is ongoing. So my motto has really been for the president, he gets to decide, investigate or interest rate. And even if he chooses to have his Fed nominee move through by dropping the investigation, he still might not get that interest rate cut that he's hoping for.
Right. So can one assume that if Kevin Warsh is his own man and he gets this position, that we then will continue to see for the next couple of years or 2.5 years a president that puts pressure on the U.S. central bank? And that's not a good thing for anybody.
It's not a good thing for anybody. I think that if we were to see Kevin Warsh ascending to the chairmanship of the Fed, I think that he would focus on some of the other initiatives that might matter for the administration. He might focus on shrinking the Fed's footprint, the Fed's balance sheet, shrinking the degree to which the Fed interacts with shrinking the extent to which the Fed is participating in bank regulation, and even and instead focusing on deregulation and reining in the Fed's interest in other things, let's say, climate policy and encouragement of reductions in banks lending to fossil fuels and other sort of energy producers. I think that those are ways that he could placate the administration without truly delivering the interest rate cuts that he needs. And I think that he has somebody in Secretary Bessent that understands that swift interest rate cuts wouldn't necessarily be great for long-term financing costs anyway.